To talk about the G7 summit, we are joined on the line by Dr. Tim Murithi of the Institute of Justice and Reconciliation from Cape Town. Thank you very much for joining us on our program.
Well, thank you for having me, and good afternoon to you and the listeners.
Yeah. Does this grouping have any relevance in the 21st century where industrialized countries come together to talk about the current challenges facing the world?
Yes, this phenomenon has been with us for quite some time, and even evolved to a G8, which included Russia. But now, since Russia is at loggerheads with the West, largely to speak, we have the G7 again. But I think it's symptomatic of an international system that is out of step with the 21st century, where we should be looking, in fact, to create more democratic fora, particularly for African countries to be able to voice their concerns and shape the international global agenda. So that is my sense that this G7 formation will continue with us for quite some time, but unfortunately does not really speak to the democratic ethos that we should all be aspiring to.
Now, with Nigeria invited, what difference is it going to make for the current economic and development challenges faced by African countries?
Well, as you know, Nigeria is now the largest economy in Africa with, I think, a total count of GDP of close to $510 billion. Recently overtook South Africa, in fact. But the G7, in a sense, is reaching out to Nigeria. Recent elections there led to the election of Muhammad Buhari. And the intention, I think, is to invite Nigeria back into the community of nations, because being the largest economy in Africa, it obviously has a pivotal role to play in helping to turn around and in fact, drive this Africa Rising theme that's emerging, about Africa's being the last economic frontier and a lot of growth potential, going forward.
Well, talking about the role of Russia in the G7, where it was excluded, do you think it will ever be brought back, since they have been talking about its involvement in Ukraine, and that if it continues, the sanctions will remain in place and may be escalated?
Yes, I think the situation now is very complex as far as Russia is concerned. The situation in Ukraine, where there are allegations that the Russian troops have in fact infiltrated into Ukrainian territory, and the West has imposed these sanctions to prevent the Russian government, in a sense, to continue this expansionist agenda. But Russia, in fact, disagrees with that perspective, and in fact has reiterated that it's not involved in any kind of surreptitious intervention, and that NATO has nothing to fear from Russia. The West, particularly the United States government, we heard President Obama yesterday. We also had the press secretary to the White House stating that Russia is trying to revive or reignite the Cold War, at least rhetoric, and might even move into more type of Cold War behavior. So unless this issue is resolved amicably, because one doesn't see how it can be addressed if different sides have different perceptions of the same situation, it's not likely that Russia will be invited back anytime soon to this construct of nations.
Well, just before you go, remember in 2001, the G8 then, when Russia was still within this grouping, agreed to support NEPAD. So at the moment, there has been little showing on that 14 years down the line. What do you think is going to happen regarding that? Because many people are saying that this looks like just a talk shop. Nothing is happening in Africa, is not benefiting from this relationship.
Yes, in fact, NEPAD is a program now. It's an agency of the African Union, and it's significant that the chairperson of the African Union, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, was at the G7 summit in Germany. It's significant that, in fact, the developed countries, the G7 in particular, have not particularly come to the party on this issue of supporting the NEPAD initiative, NEPAD program. And so you find that, in fact, a lot of people are beginning to write off whether there is any genuine commitment, in fact, to create a partnership where Africa is generally included as a partner rather than a paternalistic relationship that currently exists, where the G7, in fact, continue to look down. They don't use the overt language, but continue to look at Africa more as a source for resources, for extraction of natural resources, rather than a net contributor to the global economy, with Africa trading itself out of poverty rather than, in fact, relying on aid.
Mm-hmm. All right. Dr. Tim Murithi, thank you very much for joining us on PM News. Dr. Tim Murithi is talking to us live from Cape Town. He's from the Institute of Justice and Reconciliation right here on PM News.